What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Celtics Collective, brought to you by Heavy on Sports. I'm Adam Taylor, and to the right of me today, not the left, we're not doing the Beyonce anymore. I've got Mr. Keith Smith. What's going on, Keith?
I'm good, man. It's funny because I guess if we flipped it, I'd be on your left if I'm looking at it mirror image. So it still all works. It's all good. We're here. That's all that matters, and we're here after a game one win. Celtics are 1-0 in the playoffs. So there's nothing wrong in our world today.
I just want to put it out there that Joe Mazzulla is now undefeated when coaching a playoff team.
Truth.
It doesn't need not a big sample size, but undefeated. Undefeated. So we're gonna.
Well, much like me in my high school soccer career, I scored a goal 30 seconds into my first game because I was in at striker, and I charged the goalie when they played it back to him. He kicked it directly into my face, and it went directly into the goal. And my coach was like, "You should retire now because it's never going to get better or worse than that." So.
And did you retire?
No, I kept playing. I played for years.
I tell you what, man, I've had some horror stories playing sports, but I've never had one where I scored accidentally on purpose with my face and then chose to continue.
Good. Yeah. I a kid, I had the rec spec goggles, like Horace Grant too, that I wore when I played soccer and basketball. So yeah, it was a sight. I was a real handsome looking guy out there on the field or court.
They were trendy then, though, right? It's not like they.
Yeah, I don't know, but nothing like that is cool when you're like 13 to 18 years old.
I look at Horace Grant now and I'm like, dude, you were stylish. You were Billie Eilish out here.
Yeah.
But
big t-shirt Billie Eilish.
Yeah, that's the one. I don't know the words, but it's definitely the one.
That's as much as I know too.
So we're gonna let's get back on the rails because I don't know where we are, but we're not in basketball conversation right now. I've watched the live viewers drop from like 10 to 1 in this.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Good. So now it can just be me and you chatting.
Yeah, and now that's when I feel more comfortable, Keith. I'm more comfortable. So I want to start off with the Hawks defense, right? We came in knowing it was porous. We spoke about it on the preview that we did. We noted how Trae Young was going to be a turnstile. We just knew all of these different things was going to come to light. But you scroll through Twitter during the game, and I just want to shout out League Pass for not letting me start the game until it was halftime. Thank you for that. But you scroll through social media during the game, and it felt like so many people were shocked at just how bad Atlanta was, or on the contrary, just how good Boston's offense was. And this is going to be a question where your answer is just going to be both. But which one do you think kind of played a bigger part? Was Atlanta's defense just that bad, or was Boston's offense just that good?
Atlanta's defense, it's more that Atlanta's defense is that bad, but I thought the Celtics process was really good throughout the game. I thought they did a really good job of never settling. They were on the attack the entire time, whether it was to get all the way to the rim, which Tatum and Brown seemingly did whenever they wanted, or to get into the paint for those kick-out passes, for those setups for wide open shots. There was very little no pass possessions. Those were all almost solely in transition, which those are okay in transition, right? Because the idea is you're getting it up quick and getting right into your shot. There were only a handful of one pass possessions too, where they brought it down, maybe ran one action and made a pass, and a couple of those were like, well, it was one pass because it finished with a lob or a back cut for a layup or whatever it was. So I thought Boston's process was really good, but I think this was mostly about them taking advantage of a very bad Hawks defense.
It also felt to me like they were definitely taking advantage of a lack of wing defense. They were running a lot of stagger actions on both sides of the floor, a lot of pin downs, and there was just no one. And we said this on the preview as well, and I think we're going to speak about it relentlessly for the next week or so. There was just no one that could rotate over to help. I felt like at times when there was someone rolling off one of those screens that the John Collins was being overmatched as the tag man, and Okongwu or Capella were just too slow to get back in time to kind of really offer any form of rim protection other than like rear view protection. And the Celtics just took advantage by upping the pace in the first half. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, the second half was a completely different story because the Celtics took their foot off the gas a little bit. The Hawks actually found a little bit of a sense of pride. It felt like they weren't playing better. They just had a bit more pride in what they were trying to do. And then things just kind of ground their way through. Boston I'd say, I wouldn't say slumped, but they definitely dragged their feet towards the finish line. And after the game, DeJounte Murray said, "Hey, we need to use that second half performance, take it into game 2, and that should be our momentum." I just want to get your take, because when I heard him say that, I was like, that's a very fair point, and no one can discredit that argument. But the Celtics took their foot off the gas just as much as you guys upped your intensity. So when those two things level out, you're right back in the same spot you was to begin the game.
Yeah, it's very hard in the NBA to hold a 30 plus point lead at 30 plus points because it's just natural. You're not going to go quite as hard. And Boston played a lot slower in the second half than they did in the first half. First half, it was get it and go. And it didn't matter who it was, whoever rebounded, it was. And that's one of the beauties of the non-Rob Williams starting lineup group. So what they're starting right now with Horford, Tatum, Brown, White, and Smart, it's just go. Whoever gets it, go. Like, you can initiate and bring it up. Rob's, he's never going to really be that guy. And we saw the one disaster where they passed it to him in the middle of the laying on a break, and he just made a complete mess of it there. So, and I'm picking on him a little bit because that was probably the only negative thing he did. It felt like all game long, but it is. I think for the Celtics, it really hit a point where, in the second half, you're just not going to push as hard. It's just instinct, right? You get a team down 30. The instinct is not, let's try to beat them by 60. Those things happen sometimes, right? Where you just can do no wrong, right? You can't miss. Every shot you throw up goes in. The other team can't make a shot. And sometimes that happens. But in this case, if you get to the playoffs, you're at least a decent team. And that's where we are with Atlanta. They're a decent team. But I think the reality is there's just too much of a gap. Now, Murray's not wrong in that if they play a little harder, they play a little more pressed up at the level of the ball on the perimeter and really kind of get into the Celtics ball handlers, they could create some turnovers. We know Boston's prone to some sloppiness for sure. But I think it is more of a situation where it is, let's not be too let's not think like they found real solves for what ailed them throughout the course of the game, because that's not really what happened.
Sorry, I'm dealing with a dog that's trying to bite me at the same time as talking. You point out on Rob, and that isn't a point that I've touched on here, but you did say something that really stuck out to me. You could probably hear him barking under the table. I do apologize. One of the things you pointed out was that one play was pretty much the only bad thing he did all game. Yeah. And when you look at everything else that he did, the impact he had as a role man, the impact he had, the impact he had as a screener, as a rebounder, it's just really interesting for what he's able to do when he's fully healthy.
Big time. Yeah, big time. He is his just being there near the rim on defense, even if he's not actively going after block shots or actively going after, drivers or anything like that. Just his presence there lifts the defense to a whole other level. It also, I think, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, the guys on the perimeter, they're a little bit more willing to go for a steal or go for a deflection because, Rob will help clean it up. If it gets through and the guy gets behind me, Rob's back there kind of just lurking and hanging out to do his thing. And then his, being a rim threat. And, on the other end of the floor, just as a dimension they don't have when they don't have him, because nobody else can replace it. Yeah, Luke Cornett catches the occasional lob, but it's not like Rob, right? Where it feels like when everything's going well for the Celtics, it feels like they're almost having an in-game who can throw it higher kind of contest to see if Rob can go up and get it. And it's like, then sometimes that turns into ridiculous turnovers. But in this one, I caught it cut out in the takeaways for Celtics blog, 4 different lobs. Where it was lob plays to Rob. And then there were his other 2 baskets came off Brogdon driving dishes where he drove and then just kind of left it for him. So, just his impact around the rim on both ends of the floor, absolutely tremendous. And something you called up before the series, his facilitation ability from the top of the key. I think he only had a couple of assists in the game, if I'm right. Yeah, he had 2 assists, but it's just the threat of him out there as a passer and some of the things he can do out there too. It's just, he brings a completely different dimension to the Celtics offense that they don't have when he's not in the game.
And I also think, look, when you talk about Marcus Smart had his best defensive game of the season, I think this was Rob's best rim protecting game of the season. And that facilitation from the top of the key doesn't always necessarily. I like what Tom Thibodeau said after the Knicks game when he spoke about Josh Hart being a playmaker. And I've definitely see this more Derrick White than Robert Williams, but it's not so much creating for others. It's coming up with the play that your team needs, the big rebound, the big block, the big steal. And the Celtics have a bunch of these like Tom Thibodeau playmakers that do what needs to be done in that moment. And this was one of those games for Rob where he really kind of dominated in every way that Boston needed him to. When they needed him to be a roller, he did. When they needed the rim runner, that's what he was. And that evolution shows you now that, hey, when healthy, he's going to be just as impactful as a Derrick White or a Malcolm Brogdon. But the problem is, can he stay healthy? And that's going to be a conversation that hopefully we don't have to have this off season. But what I do want to do is I want to lead that into the Derrick White conversation, as I think he was arguably the best player on the floor throughout the full game. I think he performed ridiculously well on offense, defense. I like the subplot of him going up against Murray, two former Spurs teammates facing off in the postseason. And I think he had the better of Murray every time he was switched on to him. I don't think there was many possessions where I thought Derrick White made a bad decision or got beat off the dribble. To me, arguably, he was the best player for the Celtics down the last 3 or 4 games of the regular season going in. And now that trade that so many people thought was a bad trade for Brad Stevens looks like a masterstroke.
Yeah, I mean, I've said my piece on this a million different places and outlets and in ways. It was never a bad trade. It was always a good trade. Derrick White is really, really good. And when they got into a spot of we really want him, that was just something where it was like, yeah, they like, Brad Stevens said it was like years they had been kind of looking at trying to how they could get Derrick White. And then they finally did. So I think to your point in this game, it's him, Tatum, Brown, pick one of the 3. It's fine. I think they were the 3 best players on the floor. I think Tatum and Brown, it just stands out a little bit more sometimes because it's a little more flashy the way they do it. But I think with White, just super steady. And I loved him. Trae Young dies on screens. And if they're going to try to put Trae Young on Derrick White needs to continue to be aggressive with the pull-up jump shot. If he's going to take those pull-up threes behind those screens, great. Keep taking them. I don't care if game 2, if he misses his first 5, take the next 5. Doesn't matter. Just keep shooting them when they're good shots. And just, he really, kind of took it right to him. And that's what happens with Atlanta is you start to run out of options, and you could already see it in game 1. I don't know how many other ways we can defend. Probably their next thing, I don't know if you break it out in game 2, but definitely by the time the series transitions to Atlanta, if the Celtics win game 2, is going to be just going more to Collins at the 5 and trying to play smaller and just hoping for the best that way, because they don't have a good game plan to match what Boston can do.
Any position, though, it's not just at the guard position, it's just everywhere. You mentioned Derrick White's pulling up off screens, and I wrote about this earlier, so I'm just pulling up the stats that I pulled because I put the work in. Why not pull the stats up?
There it is.
So this is perfect podcasting. So he's took 20.3% of his shots this season have been off the pull up. He's shooting 53% from 2, 35% from 3. So above league average from 2, around about league average from deep. If he's going to come off those Al Horford screens, those Rob Williams screens, and then he's in space and he pulls up, I'm completely all there for that, because throughout the season, he's shown a body of work that shows his 3-point jumper has improved. I tweeted this out yesterday saying Ben Sullivan deserves a ton of credit for the work he's put in with Derrick White. He came into Boston known as like a shot fixer, and now he's spent that time with White. White's put that work in, and now his 3-point shot is a genuine weapon. What's impressed me the most is we come into the season expecting Malcolm Brogdon to be a huge difference maker, and this is no respect to Brogdon. White has been everything we expected Brogdon to be and a bit more, and then you can go to Malcolm Brogdon. So again, it's running out of ideas, running out of options. The Hawks only have so many guards. Outside of Murray, none of them are really defensively sound. And you're coming up against a 3-headed monster that as soon as one sits, another one comes in, and they're all going to hurt you in different ways. I just don't know how you scheme for that, because once you scheme for those 3, You open up for Jaylen Brown or for
Yeah.
Jason Tatum, and if not, you're opening up for Robert Williams, which there was a lovely pick and pop sequence. I think it was in the second or third quarter where it was like a. So I can't. I think Malcolm Brogdon had it at the top of the wing. Jason Tatum set a flare screen for Horford, and then boom, Horford just pops out, gets the free from the wing, and it's just like you see John Collins sprinting out trying to cover him, and there's just nothing he could do because he's tagging the role of a Grant Williams. Well, of Robert Williams. Grant didn't play. We'll get to that in a moment. It was just so impressive all the way through. It's just like until we get to a Sixers or a Bucks, this is the Celtics are just going to look like gods. It's going to look like we went back 200 years with smartphones and look like we came down from the heavens. Because to the Hawks, this is an alien brand of basketball. They're more than 2 or 3 levels below where Boston are right now, and there's no disrespect there. You know, they've got a new coach. There's talks that they're in consideration for maybe even rebuilding without Trey. They're just not where they need to be to compete at the level that you need to be against a team like the Celtics at the moment.
Yeah, I thought John Collins looked like a fish out of water in this because he started the game on Jaylen Brown. And that's not, Boston was, I thought the best thing with Tatum and Brown was they played a little bit like Derrick White with the 0.5 decision making. It was in their hands and they were gone. Like it was either the ball is off, a jump shot is up, or I am going right to the basket. And more often than not, it was the last one there. It was just, I'm going to go right by you. And Brown, when he got Collins in space, he may not be a bigger John Collins fan on the planet than me. I love him. He's one of my favorite players, but he can't defend high level wings. That's not what he is. And the other thing is the Celtics got away with, I know we're going to talk about it later, but they got away with playing a little bit smaller because they held up. Like that's the difference. The Hawks just can't punish them because their offense isn't designed around that. Their bigs are not those kind of bigs where it's just dump it into them inside and just dominate them at the rim like that. That's just not how it goes. So yeah, the more I look at it, and I love what you said is it's like, all right, White's going to the bench. Oh, great. Here's Malcolm Brogdon. Right? It's like, I don't like it's just got to be so frustrating for defenders and even for the other coach of like, all right, we finally took this guy off the floor. And it's like, here comes the other guy who's, he's just as good. Like, and he does, things, some of the same things, some different things and all that. So, and I also thought White had a very good defensive night too. He was the primary defender on Trae Young most of the night. I thought he did a really good job. Really hounding Young over screens. The Celtics kind of tried to split the difference a little bit with, all right, we're going to keep the big high, but we're also going to, take one step off. But it's because you trust White and then Smart when he was in the game to get over the screen and rear contest and do all those things that it's going to be to bother Young. And I mean, right, it was like first minute of the game, Young caught it on the wing, thought he had White beat and went up for a layup, and White just took it right off the glass and was like, see you later, man. Like and then it was like, all right, that's how this series is going to go. You could just tell very, very early on that it was just going to be a rollover. So, and there's no reason it shouldn't continue to be that way.
And you just mentioned just before you got into the point about the way White played defensively, I liked how you kind of spoke about the bigs and how Atlanta's bigs aren't the same as what Boston's bigs are. Very much bigs in the traditional sense, rim running, low post guys. So I wanted to touch on something that we kind of spoke about yesterday, where and this kind of ties into that defense a little bit from the guards, because you did have, as you said, guys like Derrick White, Marcus Smart got some blocks down low. He also got some rebounds. Derrick White crashed the boards where he could. But the Celtics ended with a free throw advantage, a rebound advantage, but they did lose on the offensive boards. I think they lost by 2. I think so I just wanted to get your thoughts. I know this was something you kind of said, like, hey, the rebounding wasn't as bad as it looked. So I just wanted to get you see how what you saw there and how you came away feeling about that.
I think there's 2 things. One, if you didn't watch the game and you just looked at the box score, you're like, man, Atlanta got, he got they got 14 offensive boards. Like, that's bad, right? The Celtics must not have held up. And if you watch the game, there was moments where, I mean, I think they had possession where they grabbed like 3 on one possession, and then Horford finally cleared it and then got fouled, and then he was fired up and got the crowd going and everything. But I think let's get into a little bit more context here, right? Atlanta got 14 offensive rebounds, but they missed 60 shots in the game. 60. Like that is an incredibly large number. Like I don't know if people realize, that's a lot. They get up 100 shots, 98 shots for the game, and to miss 60 of them. I mean, they shot terribly. Shot terribly from three, a little bit better from two, but still weren't really good from two either. So that's where the Celtics rebound rate, defensive rebound rate, ticked below where it was in the regular season against a team like Atlanta. I'm not going to stress about that. The other important thing, 14 second chances. They scored 12 total second chance points. So just, Celtics held in there, right? It was, all right, they might have gave up one, but they didn't let them score in the second one. So that's the thing. At no point was it one of those games where I felt like, man, Boston's just getting murdered on the glass. And I'll be honest, that feeling has not been around much this entire year, which is where the stats meet the eye test, right? They're the best defensive rebounding team in the league. And it does feel like as you watch these games throughout the course of the year, yeah, that makes sense to me because it feels like they more often than not take care of their own backboard.
I also want to point out that at no point did any of those rebounds feel like a momentum killer.
No.
As you said, it hasn't felt like they've been destroyed on the glass really this year. There's been times where it's felt a little bit kind of like, man, we could really use a true rebounder. But for the most part, the Celtics have been quite good defensively this year. But when you're playing against the Hawks and they're grabbing those offensive boards, there wasn't a moment where I was like, man, the Celtics body language has changed. It wasn't hey, we've missed this rebound. Now they've caught a second one. Now there's an issue. As you said, they weren't making, if they missed that second chance point, there wasn't a third chance. There wasn't a fourth chance. And then you look at the big rotation that was in there, and you can understand that even if you do grab that offensive board, there's so much size and length around you that it's not going to be easy to get that put back. Unless you're going up and literally dunking it back on a tip in, the Celtics are going to find a way to really close out on you, take that airspace away, and then force you into working. So I'm with you. I think that the context that you provided, like I didn't even realize they'd missed 60 shots. But when you put it like that, it's like what? So they caught. So for every 4 misses, they got 1 offensive rebound.
Yeah,
you'll live with that.
Yep. Celtics defensive rebound rate during the regular season was something like 78%. In this game, it was like 76%. Yeah. So that's just, that's a matter of 1 rebound going the other way. Last thing I'll say on the rebounding, because I know we've got other stuff to get into. Derrick White, Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon combined for 17 rebounds. Huge, right? They were all over the board. Now, some of that's a volume thing again, right? A lot of rebounds available. Nobody on Boston went up and got 20 of them themselves. So everybody, kind of ate. But if the guards are back and they're doing their thing, it's just not going to hurt you the way like we saw the Hawks destroy Miami in the playing game with those putbacks.
And this is like, just to add some context to what I said a second ago, it's not like we've seen the Celtics struggle on the glass much this year. The only time they did is when they went through that really bad stretch on that West Coast run, and then they kind of like stumbled back into some home games. And during that run, it did feel like, hey, maybe they should. I remember thinking Hassan Whiteside might do well for this team right now because they're just giving up boards everywhere. But it was a really small stretch of games, and other than that, like 78% defensive rebound rate for the regular season. I don't know where that stands in the percentiles, but I'm assuming that's like a top 10 percentile.
Yeah, it's in turn. That's about where usually the best rebounding team in the league is usually at. Is right around there. So it's not like they were a historically dominant rebounding team or anything, but
reliable.
They were just good, right? They were average, good rebounding team to lead the league on the defense board. The one bugaboo is they do give up late game offensive rebounds more than I'm comfortable with. And I think a lot of that is they tend to too often, and I'll put this on Tatum and Brown more than anybody else, they leak out a little too often late. And I would always in the game crash back, get the ball, then get into whatever you're going to run. But it's chicken or the egg there, right? Because then everybody crashes back. Well, then you're going to walk it up and get into some stupid ISO that we all hate that takes 20 seconds off the shot clock to take a contested jumper. So, it's hit or miss. I could go either way. But yeah, it's I think in general, that they were in pretty good place with that.
Yeah, I feel like, at the end of the day, if you're leaking out and you're 10 points. It's a less than a 10-point lead. By all means, leak out, because you might get, might score 2, you might get 3. Now it's an 11-point lead. You know how the math works. So talking of math, I wanted to build in this segue, and it's never as good when I point it out, but I like to pat myself on the back.
Was well done.
We had the Joe Mazzulla versus Quinn Snyder matchup, and this is something that you did a really good job of breaking down. I hadn't considered it from that viewpoint in the last episode. For anybody listening or watching live, Keith basically put it out there. Look like, yep, Joe Mazzulla's coming in with a playoff experience disadvantage, but Quinn Snyder's coming in with a team disadvantage. He's only been there for 25, 26 games. He doesn't even know what he's got under the hood yet. His system hasn't been worked on enough to be integrated into muscle memory and second nature. So we see these two coaches coming in, both with their own kind of issues that they're working through. And it felt like Mazzulla won this coaching battle. He made quick decisions. He called timeouts. He was pulling guys when he thought they weren't matching up correctly, or that, you know, their defender was getting the best of them. He switched up schemes quite frequently. And he really walked that fine line of when to call a play and when to let somebody on the floor dictate how it went. Because sometimes the read and react is better than just running that same. So I thought that Mazzulla, arguably, again, we've said it was Marcus Smart's best defensive game, Rob Williams' best rim protecting game. This was probably one of Joe Mazzulla's best coaching games of the season so far.
Thought his ATOs were pretty good. I thought his sideline and baseline out of bounds, so slob and blob. If anybody ever wonders, because Adam and I will use those when we write a lot, slob and blob. That's all it means, is sideline out of bounds or baseline out of bounds. Those were good. I think the Celtics scored on either 2 or 3 of those plays in the game. One was just gorgeous play design, where it was everything was set up to look like Tatum was popping out for a 3. And it was really designed to just get Rob on the roll. That clip is in the takeaways over on Celtics blog if anybody wants to read it. It's just that just, you know, was just perfect. And Tatum was like an NFL quarterback, where he just threw it to where he knew Rob would be, right? And wasn't even there. Rob hadn't even fully started his role before Tatum threw it up. I thought those were all really good. I thought with Sam Hauser, I think he's starting to recognize the way if Hauser misses a couple shots kind of badly, when he first gets out there, he probably doesn't have it. And he only played 11 minutes. I would have liked to seen, there are spots you could have worked Grant Williams in here. I don't love, let's not put too many minutes on guys already. Tatum was at basically 40, Horford 38, White 38 and a half. But it's the playoffs. I kind of get it. I know we're going to get into the Hauser Williams conversation too. But yeah, I thought Mazzulla all around coached a really nice game. I thought he did a good job kind of controlling things. The other thing I thought was cool is, even when things got a little, I don't even want to say dicey, because it never got there. Things got kind of a little sloppy. He didn't revert into, and it's still, they have this card left in the deck to play, or in their hand, I guess, to play. They didn't go to, all right, let's just hunt Trae Young then. They never did. They just kind of, it happened naturally a handful of times. But for the most part, it was, we're going to leave that one, we'll leave that up in the cupboard. And if we need to take it down, we'll take it down and get into it if we need to. But they never did it, directly, where it was, all right, bring small pick and rolls or whatever to make sure we're getting Trae Young on Brown or Tatum. It happened a handful of times throughout the game, but for the most part, it was, let's just run our stuff and let's just kind of do our thing. And that was that was really big, I think, for the Celtics to be able to do what they did offensively. To go all the way back to the start of the show, a lot, because the Hawks just kind of let them, but it was, they still have plenty of things they can go to that we didn't see as well. And I thought that was good from Mazzulla, rather than sometimes you'll see first time coaches are, hey, let me really empty my playbook here and show you all the great things, I came up with the week to prepare. And it's like, we can hold some stuff in reserve. We're getting other things so easily done.
I like the way that, not going at Trae Young is kind of going against expectations as well. Mm-hmm. It is a misdirection. Like, you're coming into the game, right? They're going to hunt Trae, and you've prepared for it, you've game planned for it. Boom, it's not happened once, and now all of that time you spent planning for that is wasted in this game. It's probably not going to be wasted in this series, but I would expect the Celtics to pull that off that shelf if they were chasing a game. If they're down 5 with 3 minutes left, that's when I think that Joe Mazzulla goes to his we're going to punish Trae Young kind of actions. And then
Yeah.
the question is then, does Snyder leave him on the floor? Does he pull him off the floor? That's a completely different scenario we can look into. As for the ATOs, the slubs mainly, I really like them. The one you mentioned, what interested me about that one, and I really liked it, was about 3 possessions earlier, the Celtics had run the same thing, but Tatum had scored a free. So it was a stagger screen on the was it on the strong
Left
side? On the
side.
weak side.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the weak side, Tatum curled off, got the ball at the top of the perimeter, nailed the free. Then you go to the sideline out of bounds. They run a motion strong, so it's 2 reverse passes. Then the weak side stagger. But then this time, Rob cuts, and now all of a sudden he's dragging defenders with him. Tatum's open. Everyone scrambles. Boom, over the top into the lob. And this felt like a game where Rob just was bouncy again. You know, like
Yeah, Rob.
Mazzulla was like,
yeah, I always say these games are when Rob looks like Rob, like all caps ROB, right? Like it's like Rob looks like Rob, and when Rob looks like all caps Rob, they're the best team in the league, and it's not even close. Like he's that big of a ceiling raiser while also not doing anything to lower the floor at all. Like it's they're just that good. Last thing I'll say on just kind of Mazzulla stuff, I thought they did a really good job when the Hawks went to DeJounte Murray on Tatum. Not just saying, all right, let's play Tatum out on the perimeter, because Murray can give Tatum trouble there. Those are still kind of the guys that Tatum has a little bit of trouble with on the perimeter. Those quick guards who have quick hands, because his handle's much, much better, but it's still not super tight. But they went to, all right, we're going to get Tatum on duck-ins. They went to one straight post-up with Tatum on Murray. They had another one where it was like, they kind of ran everything on the strong side, then a quick reversal to get Tatum on the weak side against Murray where no help could come. And it was really good stuff. And you could see you could see if you watch back on the clips, you could see Mazzulla calling it out. So it wasn't just the players getting it, but then also the players getting, all right, this is what he wants very quickly and flowing into it. You can now see that the core of this group have been together for hundreds upon hundreds of games now, because they just flow into stuff very easily at times versus, all right, what's coach want? And then guys are kind of pointing to 3 other guys where to go. It's just, all right, this is what he wants. Let's get into it. And I thought that was really good too.
I want to point out with players listening to what the coach wants and flowing into it quickly, that's buying. That's not only having an understanding between all of you as a unit, but also buying into what the coach wants, having faith in the scheme that he's running and in what he's asking of you. And then, like the other day, I spoke with Chris Forsberg on a pre-game one, and he was telling me how Joe Mazzulla's got Malcolm Brogdon drinking bone broth in the start of every day. And I'm just like, what? But it's that type of buy-in that's really helping everybody. Like the players are flowing into things quickly. Mazzulla feels empowered to keep drawing up new plays and new actions because he knows the guys are going to execute what he puts out there. Quinn Snyder's got a long road ahead of him to even get to a point where players are flowing into what he wants quickly. Never mind listening and adapting on the fly when he's trying to change course in the middle of the game, because it's just so late in the season for him to have taken over. I don't think anybody expected them to make the postseason. Obviously, you speak about it outside, but behind closed doors, people are probably like, should we tank for Wemby? Because, everybody wants to tank for Wemby. I want to touch on the...
when you're throwing down put back dunks off your own missed 3-pointer, like I'd tank for him too. I might even argue the Celtics shouldn't have thrown it all away. Lost every
for
game.
Wemby.
Yeah, why not?
I mean,
right? So,
at this point,
I'm being just so everybody realizes I'm being very silly. I don't truly.
At this point, Dakota from Braintree on Twitter is having a field day because Hachimura had a good game, and he thinks that everybody should have traded Tatum for Hachimura.
Yeah, I don't. My struggle with the Hachimura stuff is because I tweeted something yesterday like, man, I didn't have this on my bingo card. And a bunch of people are like, oh, he's always been this guy. No, he hasn't been. If he was always this guy, the Wizards would be really good, and they wouldn't have traded him for 2 second-round picks, like in Kendrick Nunn. Like, so just stop. Nothing drives me more crazy than he's always been this guy. No, he hasn't been. He's good, and he had a good year 2 years ago. He had a really nice under the radar season when everybody had stopped watching Washington, and he was playing really, really well, and people didn't get it. But come on, we can't say these guys, He's always been this guy. If he was, he'd be sitting on a max deal already. So sorry, that was just I
No,
added
it's
that.
fair. And I think it's a really good indicator that surrounding talent matters.
Yeah.
Like the players that you play around make a huge difference. I remember I said something to someone a few years back when it was Bobby Portis, and I was like, man, Bobby Portis is having a great year for Milwaukee. They were like, but it helps when Giannis is next year. I'm like, yeah, well, blatantly, but you still need to produce yourself when you're surrounded by that talent and accept that role. And I think so. It can be a double-edged sword when you say that, because you can be like, man, now he's got talent around him. We're seeing the best of him. Then someone else will be like, well, you're always going to look good when you got AD and Bron. Yeah, but if you don't perform in that role, you're not going to look good. So it's a double-edged sword. We're going far too far off the rail. So I'm going to pull it back. And because we've just turned it over ourselves during the conversation, we can look at turnovers. So the Celtics had a lot. What was it, 16 turnovers? More than that.
Right? They had 16, and then I think they had a couple of shot clock violations.
Yeah, so it was,
but those were intentional at the end of the game.
Now, I will say this: when you play at pace, you have turnovers. That's just the way it works. The Warriors turn the ball over a ton because they play fast. Now, some of these were sloppy. Some of them were just trying to get the ball out of your hands without understanding the situation around you. DeJounte Murray was a pest. He was pesky through the night. But some of them were, credit to Atlanta defense. They did a good job of reading where the ball was going, anticipating what the Celtics were trying to do. I'm not too concerned about the turnovers. I genuinely look at them as a byproduct of pace. I'm going to have a look at the minute to see how many were in the first half versus the second and see if my theory stands.
It was almost split even. I think it was 8-8.
Okay, so I'm going to say the first 8 were because they were playing fast. The second 8 was because they were playing too slow. And then I'm going to win either way.
Yeah. Well, and I honestly, I know you're kind of trying to cover there, but I think that's actually what it was. I think in the first half it was because the first half, it might have been. No, it wasn't in the first half. It was the one we talked about already, where they threw it to Rob in the middle of the floor. Like, that's just a bad decision no matter what. Like, he's not going to do anything good with it in the middle of the floor where he's got to take multiple dribbles and find somebody. So that was a mess. Everybody had 2 except for Tatum had 6, and Brown rather had 6. The Brown ones I'm a little worried about just because it looked like where the cut on his hand was bothering him more passing than it was shooting and even dribbling the ball. He had a couple missed dribbles in there, and that's every game. Tatum and Brown are going to have a couple mishandles, and they're going to kick it away, and the other team's going to get it. I think a couple things were until the first half ones, they basically threw it away and then shut everything down. They didn't let the Hawks get out and running. Second half ones, Atlanta I think they had like 4 pick sixes where it was just something to get it at the top of the key and I'm off to the races to score. And that's where it started to get a little like, wait, is this how this is going to go? And then Boston got it back under control and really kept them at arm's length the entire game. But it was, I think, for me, it was, just, that sloppiness. I mean, Al Horford had one that, like, we probably won't see another one like this again in the playoffs, where he got it at the top of the key, just had no idea where Bogdanovich was, and he just poked it away from him from behind, and then got a run out layup. Like, it's, I don't know. I didn't leave there being like, oh man, they were super messy again. With that, mostly because then they got it back under control and took care of the game. So yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on the turnovers but it was definitely something we needed to point out because someone will be like, how can you talk about the Celtics game if you didn't talk about the turnovers? Well, we did now, so leave it.
Yep.
So we can move on to the final topic, which you already kind of touched on. And, I don't think the amount we spoke about this coming into the series, I don't think there's much meat on the bone. I'd like to say that just because Grant didn't play in game 1 doesn't mean he won't play in 2, 3, 4, or potentially 5. There won't be a 6 or a 7 if the basketball gods having a good day. But on the flip side, so here's my concern, right? Grant Williams sits this series. It's a better matchup for Sam Hauser. The way the Celtics want to play the pace and the screening actions and the mobility they need, it just doesn't suit what Grant brings. But then you throw him in after arguably what would that be then 3 or 4 weeks of not playing competitive basketball.
Yeah, probably about 2-ish in that
And now
range.
you're
Yeah.
like, hey, now you're going to guard Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, and we're expecting you to be the Grant from last year, but you're completely and utterly out of rhythm. That feels unfair. That feels to me like you're kind of setting him up to fail. And I understand this. Well, you should stay ready and you've got to be ready. Staying ready and being ready are completely different when you're guarding some of the best in the league. And I just feel like we will likely see Grant sporadically throughout this series for that reason, if only that reason, just to keep that rhythm going for him.
Yeah, at no point did Boston need or want to go to a second big if it wasn't Robinau. And they played Robinau. I haven't checked the exact numbers, but that felt like it was very few minutes together. They let's see, Rob played 21 minutes, Al played 38. So yeah, there's probably, there's obviously then some overlap, but probably about 8 total minutes. But it felt like the Celtics goal was let's play small most of the time against the Hawks because that's the best way to attack them is like we talked about it. Then you put John Collins on an island and now it's like what's he going to do? When they flipped it and Okongwu came in, Okongwu ended up a little bit on the island and Collins was up on Rob, who's going to hang out obviously closer to the basket. So it just got very, very, I think flow of the game was there just wasn't a spot in this one. Now, I think what we'll see is there's going to be a game where Horford or Rob's going to pick up foul trouble, or Tatum or Brown will, and they're going to have to play a little bigger just because the smaller options aren't going to hold up quite as much as you want. So there's going to be time for Grant here. I'm not as worried about him with the whole, stay ready so you don't have to get ready, all that stuff people say, because I think he'll step in and do what he does defensively whenever he's called upon. I think where I do worry is you can't just expect him to come in and just start hitting threes right away. I think he's a rhythm guy. I think he's at his best when he plays consistently, gets consistent shots, and he's able to knock them down like we saw in last year's playoffs and early in this regular season. So, but for the most part, I'm not too worried about it. And I saw some people speculating, because people just can't be happy and everything has to be conspiracy of there's something nefarious between Grant and Joe Mazzulla or Grant and the organization. I don't think it's that. I think it's just, this wasn't the game and isn't the series for him. So let's just be smart about how we handle this moving forward. But yeah, overall, I think it's fine.
You're not going to win either, right? You play him and he gets cooked.
Yeah.
Oh, why did Joe play Grant? Joe should have played Hauser. There's something nefarious between Joe and Sam. There's never, you can never please everybody. I think for me, it does make sense. I do agree that Williams is definitely a rhythm shooter. I feel like that's the same issue Pritchard has dealt with all season. But I do also think that there's something to be said about, and I'm happy to kind of have a bit of a different opinion with you here. I do think there's something to be said about consistency, giving you a little bit more feel defensively. I wouldn't like to be asked to go and write. Say if I haven't written for a year or 4 weeks, and then someone's like, "Do you want to write this article for ESPN?" I'm going to be like, "No, that's a big audience, and I'm completely out of practice. I'm going to write stupid words." So I feel like Grant definitely might need rhythm defensively. But other than that, I'm not upset that he didn't play. I don't think he's going to feel anyway. Sure, his free agency value might have a little bit of performance-related tie-in, but he's going to get paid either way, whether it's what he wants to get paid or slightly below. I'm not too worried. I'm going to end it with this: Celtics Hawks on Tuesday. Do the Celtics go 2-0 up?
Yeah. Yeah, I will be shocked if they're not headed to Atlanta up 2-0. And I think we're going to see more of the same in Tuesday's game. I think they're going to, again, race out. Atlanta will shoot a little bit better, than they did, of course. But Boston did. It's like Boston had a, absolutely ridiculous shooting night. They were at 40% from three. I wouldn't be surprised if Celtics get more threes up in this game, but I don't all of a sudden see the Hawks providing a ton of resistance driving to the basket. So maybe that's not necessarily the way to play this one. And it's just going to be what it is. I picked very, very rare that I pick a team to win in a sweep in the playoffs. Picked Celtics in a sweep, and I have no reason to feel any different about that.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I expect JD Davison to get 6 points in game.
Well, he can't play. He's a two-way guy. So
Oh yeah, that was a
So,
silly.
yeah,
That was stupid.
yeah.
That was me not thinking.
Just
Okay, I'm
give it
gonna
to
go out.
Peyton Pritchard. Just say
Yeah,
Peyton Pritchard gets like
Pritchard. Yeah.
16
The
or
thing is, I
something.
knew that as well, but me just trying to be funny, I put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah.
We'll go.
I
Pritchard
should have
6 point.
probably just well, we'll just change it to Justin Champagny. Anybody
Yeah,
watching live, you didn't hear
Champagne.
that. We'll change it in post. There we go.
Yeah, we'll change it in post. Like me just trying to be funny, put my foot in my mouth as usual. I do it a lot. And sometimes it's right face to face with somebody and they're just like, dude, did you just really say that? And I'm like, yeah, why? And then I click it through and I'm like, man, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So it happens to me all the time.
Adam, I'm in my mid 40s and my family is still waiting for this to catch up to here with a filter in between, and it still hasn't happened.
It just doesn't.
At this point, I've just given up on it.
At least we're older now, and it's not this filtering through to this because when you're young,
yeah.
So I'd rather just be a bit loud.
Yep.
With that being said, everybody, I want everyone to have a great Monday, Tuesday if you're listening the day after. Enjoy game 2. We'll be back Thursday, which means just before game 3, if I'm correct, to kind of talk about what we saw, and then there's no need to talk about what to expect because it's just going to be more of the same. Celtics to dominate. Everybody have a great day. Keith, as usual, thank you for joining me, man.
Absolutely.